Right now, there's a massive opportunity in AI, but most people will miss it because they're distracted. In this video, I'm condensing over 250 hours of building AI agents and automations in Claude Code so you can take advantage of this opportunity. Right, no messing around, straight into it. So what you will learn by the end of this video: is it too late to start getting into AI? Spoiler alert, it isn't. The AI bubble and what that actually is and what it means. What you need and what you don't need to start. Understanding the basics of AI agents and automation, what the difference between the two is, what's an API, what's a webhook, and what is agentic versus traditional. You've probably heard agentic being thrown around recently. How to set up Claude Code with VS Code, the file structure in each of the projects so that you build the agents correctly, how to plan each of your projects, and how to manage the context in them. We're going to do a full live build and production ready systems so that when your agents and automations are ready, you can push them into production properly. Starting with, is it too late? And actually, in my opinion, you are early. There's a lot of fear mongering online, like, oh, you're too late, it's all saturated, AI automation saturated. But realistically, if you go out in the real world and maybe you've got a job at the minute, at your job, how advanced are they at AI right now? Maybe they're using ChatGPT. There's a study that 78% of businesses are using AI, and you can guarantee 77.99 of them is just using ChatGPT or Copilot or Gemini or Claude. It's none of them, pretty much none of them, have any sort of sophisticated AI systems, but in 5 to 10 years, all of them will. In my previous role, I was an outbound sales rep, and I dealt with thousands of companies, directly or indirectly. And I'm telling you now, none of them, or pretty much none of them from what I could tell, had any sort of sophisticated AI in their business whatsoever. So the opportunity is massive and you are early, trust me. When you get into the AI space and you're in Twitter, on YouTube, and you see the comments and you're in the different groups, you just think everyone is talking about AI, everyone's more advanced than you, every business has it, everyone's landing clients, there's nothing left for you. But as I talked about previously on that previous picture, the reality is like 99.9% of businesses don't have anywhere near the sort of AI infrastructure that's coming over the next few years and is already here now as well. So before we get into it, what will you need to build these systems in Claude Code? You might think you'll need a degree in computer science, or you'll need a flip chart paper, or you'll need a business plan, or you'll need an orange suitcase, but you won't need any of those things. Claude Code actually works really well on a really basic computer. So all you need is a computer, and if you don't have the green bag, then you won't be able to build them, I'm sorry. Now, obviously you won't need the green bag, but you'll need a computer, Claude Code, VS Code, and that's it. And if you've never set up Claude Code or VS Code before, we're going to do that in this video as well. First of all, starting with what's the difference between automation and agent. So what's the difference between AI automation and AI agent? So this diagram puts it really well. So an automation is exactly like an assembly line, or at least this assembly line, because something comes down like a trigger, and then it has fixed paths that it can go down based on the information or the data that is coming in off of that trigger. So there is still multiple routes it can take, but they are all fixed, and it can't just decide, you know what, I'm going to jump off the assembly line and walk around over here and go up here. It has to go down each of the fixed paths. Whereas an agent, you give it a goal or a situation, and it goes into its tool shop, if you like, has access to quite a few different tools. It just picks and chooses. So say you give it a certain tool, it goes over, grabs the spanner, whacks it against this table a few times, figures out that's not working, comes over, grabs the drill, drills the table, gets a bucket of paint, pours that all over the table, and then tries to get to the end of your situation or goal given the tools that it was given. Hopefully I've not overcomplicated it with that stupid example, but the bottom line is the automation has fixed paths and the agent doesn't. Here's another visual if it helps. So the AI automation has a trigger, and it goes down step 1, step 2, step 3, and it doesn't have to be a linear process like this. It can be, have conditionals, what's known as conditionals. So if this, then that. So if a mobile number comes in, then go down this route. If a landline number comes in, go down that route, and that's still an automation. Whereas an agent, you just give it a situation or a goal, and it determines between which of the tools that it has access to, which ones to use in what order, and it has a lot more autonomy in that sense. Now, what are APIs? This can always be intimidating if you've never built agents before. Basically, what an API is, it's a middleman between your agent and the tool or service that it's trying to use. And it's also like a password as well, so you want to keep them secret. So your agent wants to use a certain tool, the middleman goes into that tool, gets the specific data that it's requesting, and then brings it back to the agent. So here's another visual. There's your agent or automation. Yeah, it can be either agent or automation. It has a request. The API, depending on which one it has, because each of these will have different APIs. So all you need to do is set the APIs up, and then your agent will have access to the different tools you give it. But we'll be dealing with that in the live build later, and it's much easier to see how that works when you see it. And it sounds a lot more complicated than it is. Basically, all you're doing is going onto a platform, looking around in the settings for the API key, and then copying and paste it over. It is so simple. You don't have to build these out yourself. All the hard work's already done for you. But yeah, it sends a request over. The API bridges the gap between the request and the tool, and then the API comes back with the response. Now, what is a webhook? Pretty much a webhook is like a notification when something happens, and they travel along APIs to our agents or automations. For example, if we get a text from a customer, that will trigger a webhook which will travel along the API to our agent. For example, if we get a text or an email, that will trigger a webhook which will travel along an API to our agent or automation. And here's a little visual of that. So something happens which triggers the webhook, and then that instantly sends it over to our system, which reacts. So examples of that would be a new payment received, which might trigger a send confirmation email, a form submitted, save that to the database, or an email received, so we notify a team member on Slack or something. Now, recently the term Agentic has been blowing up everywhere. Agentic AI agents, agentic automations, all that. So what is actually meant by Agentic? So the traditional way of doing it was you build it all yourself, either on a no-code tool or with code. The agentic way of doing it is you call upon agents to build your AI agents and automations. Like Claude Code is an AI agent that will be building our automations and agents. So like I say, it just comes down to how they were built. So yeah, the traditional way of doing it, you either code it yourself or you use no-code tools like any of these. And the agentic way is using something like Claude Code or Codex or Anti-Gravity, but Claude Code is the focus for this video. Now it's time to set up Claude Code. If you've never used it before, I like to use Visual Studio Code, also known as VS Code. And what that is, it's an IDE or an integrated development environment. And basically it just gives Claude Code access to our computer to write code and build these agents. So search up Visual Studio Code and press on this link. It should take you to this page, and then download it for either Windows or Mac. Once you've opened it, you'll be on this screen, and now it's time to create a folder where all of your projects will live, basically. So just create a folder called Claude Code, and then for every new project you make, create a folder within that Claude Code folder. Once you've done that, come over to the top left on this little Explorer tab, and you can open that folder. Mine looks like this, so I've called it VS Claude Code, and then for every new project I make, then there is a folder for that as well. So for this live build, I'm going to be creating something that I've never made before, in the hopes that you can see the entire process from planning the agent to building it to how I fix it, and then the finished product at the end of it. So it's going to be a customer service chatbot on a website. You know, the one that you can press on and ask questions and it can book into the calendar and that sort of thing. So I've made a folder called CS Chatbot, and it's got my different files in it. So I'll go over what these are now. And if you want your folder set up exactly like this, then there'll be a link in the description to GitHub. And what GitHub is, it's basically a platform where people can put folders or code, and it's completely free. You just have to copy the link in the description, paste it into Claude Code, and tell it to put those files in your folder, if you want to follow along with the build, that is. So just before we come out of Visual Studio Code and I'll show you what these files mean and what they do, I'll just show you how to download Claude Code within it. So come over to the extensions tab on the left, and Claude Code should be at the top. If it isn't, just search for it and then install that there. And then once you've installed it, you will need a paid plan with Anthropic for this, by the way. And if you're just starting out, I would recommend the Pro version. I think it's £20 a month where I'm from. It might be 17. I think it's $17 or $18 in the US, and then 27 or 28 in Canada, something like that. So once you've done that, but just a point on that, it'll be the best investment you ever make. Honestly, if you put a lot of time into learning how to use it and get the most out of it and build your agents and automations with it and eventually sell them, then the return on investment is just astronomical. And it is top of the industry right now for everything like coding and building agents and building apps and websites. It is the fastest and best, and it's only getting better as well. So once you've downloaded it and logged in, there'll be a little Claude button in the top right there. Just press on that, that'll open Claude Code. You can exit out of that, come back to your folder in the top left, and then you're in. All right, now you might have seen in that folder, there's the CLAUDE.md, the plan.md, and the progress.md. So the CLAUDE.md is like the brain of the project, as well as Claude itself and Claude's model. Underneath Claude's model, we have Claude.md, which basically sets the rules and the guidelines for the project. So this image is accurate in that it sits on top of the brain. I won't call it the brain itself because that is Claude's Opus 4.6 it is at the minute. So that's the actual brain itself. This sits on top of the brain and gives it rules and regulations and guidelines as to how we want to build within Claude Code. And then the plan.md is exactly what it says on the tin, is the entire plan for the project that you make at the very start in plan mode. And then the progress.md tells new agents where we're up to on the plan, because occasionally you'll have to clear the chat because the context window fills up. And so the progress.md lets new agents know where we're up to with the build, so no context gets lost between the new chat and the old chat. So this is the build cycle that you'll go through when you're building things in Claude Code. So you'll start a new project, you'll create the plan at the start of it in plan mode, and I'll show you the best way of doing that when we're at the live build. Once you've created the plan, you'll start to build with Claude Code, and then the context window will fill up as it writes code and researches and stuff, because it tries to remember everything that it's doing, but obviously it can't remember everything up to a certain point. So that's basically what the context window is just it's each chat's memory of what you've done, and that fills up as you do more within the chat. So the context window fills. As it gets over 50% full is when the output drops and the output quality drops. So the quality of the code drops, the quality of the responses drop. So you want to save your progress to the progress.md, clear the chat, start a new session, and then you tell the new chat to get up to speed with the project by reading all three files, the Claude.md, plan.md, and the progress.md, and then you repeat the progress. You repeat the process. You continue with the build. The context window fills, you save to the progress.md, you clear the chat, new Claude gets up to speed, and then you do that again. And then you do that until the project's finished, pretty much. We're back in Claude Code. I'll just go over the different files so you know what it says inside them. So you can either create your own or at least understand mine if you're going to use the same one. So the Claude.md has a bit about your working style. So you can have a read of that, how you like to work within Claude Code. It has the tech stack that you want to use, because when you're building these agents, a lot of the front end, the back end stuff, the database, and the AI you want to use, a lot of it will be the same from agent to agent. And eventually, if you want to pair some of these agents up or create a software with them, you want them to all be built with the same stuff so that you don't run into issues and you don't have to rebuild things that are working later on. So it has the session workflow. Every session, and by session it just means new chat. So every new chat starts by reading plan.md and the progress.md, and the full rules for them are within the docs workflow MD folder. So we'll have a quick look at that afterwards. And the rules, so this is where when you're building with Claude Code, actually I can make this bigger for us all. So once you're building in Claude Code and it does something that you don't want it to do again, you can add it to the rules section. For example, a few things that have happened with me: when the server needs restarting, just do it. Sometimes it'll tell you, right, all you need to do now is restart the server. And then I'm like, hang on a minute, that's your job, mate. So just put that in the rules, and then it will won't do it in the future, or it shouldn't. Sometimes it does, but it's never Perfect. So never tell me to run commands. Sometimes it'll tell me to run commands in the terminal. I don't want to be getting involved with that sort of stuff. When errors happen, explain in plain English. Do not add features or change the approach without permission. So it's pretty lean because you don't want to make this too bloated, and because then it will miss things out and it won't follow it. So you want to keep it pretty concise and clear. Right now, the workflow MD has the rules to the plan and the progress system. So the plan is the build roadmap. It's just the plan for the project. The progress is the tracker of what's been done. And the plan.md rules is just things like never make up what to do next. Don't skip ahead. If you discover a better approach, just explain it before changing the plan. And then the session workflow, same as before. Always read the plan.md first. Check the progress.md to see exactly where the build left off. Before ending a session, ensure the progress.md is up to date. And to be honest, at the end of whenever the context window fills up, and you'll know because a little thing will show up here, you'll see when we're building. I always tell it anyway, even a lot of times it has updated the progress.md, pretty much most times it has, but I tell it to do it again just to make sure, and it'll probably end up adding a little bit more information to it if we do that. And a little bit of rules for the progress.md, like keep completed phases collapsed to a one-line summary, just so the document doesn't get hundreds of lines long, because that'll fill your context window up before you've even built anything. Only the active phase gets detailed. If I ask for something not in the plan, log it under ad hoc changes in the progress.md. The top of the progress.md must be scannable in under 10 seconds. So plan.md is a single source of truth. Progress.md is what's next. Just before we get into the build, I'm going to go over the tech stack that I like to use, which will cover 90% of your simple agents if you're just getting started, definitely, even 99%. So the LLM, or the brain, the large language model, you can use anything you want from Claude, ChatGPT. OpenRoot is a platform which lets you choose from hundreds of different models from all different providers. You can use Grok, Gemini, anything. I use Claude for pretty much everything because I'm generally building agents that speak to customers, and I find that Claude is the best at writing like a human, so I choose that one. And for the backend, Python and Fast API is like what most people build agents with. Even before Claude Code, that's what people actually coded them with. So that is pretty standard across the industry. For the front end, this is just what I've found to make the best looking stuff in terms of websites, dashboards, landing pages. So Next.js, React, Tailwind. By the way, before I keep going, you don't have to understand how to code or what Fast API even does or what Next.js is or React. You just have to tell Claude Code that those are the tools you want to use, as this is all code and backend stuff. For databases and authorization, so databases just log in all things like customer details or appointment IDs, stuff like that, any conversations with customers like transcripts, and authorization. So say if you were creating an app or a website that you needed a login for, you can use Supabase for both of those. For voice agents, I use Vapi as an all-in-one platform to handle things like the latency, the transcription, and the conversation. And within Vapi, you can use 11 Labs and DeepGram. 11 Labs is for your voice. They've got the widest range of voices. And DeepGram is the transcription. So transcribing the voice on the call into text so that the AI can process it and create a response. For email, obviously you've got Google and Microsoft. They're the biggest ones. And what I like to use for cold emailing campaigns or emailing campaigns in general when you're dealing with a company is Mailgun. The only thing you'll need for that is a domain. So most companies you work with will have a domain for their website. And so Mailgun is the best for that because you can set up as many different subdomains within Mailgun as you want. So you can send loads of emails without affecting the health of the main domain because cold email campaigns, especially from AI, can affect the health of the main domain in terms of things like getting put in spam and stuff like that. Communications, so things like text and calling, or your texting and calling can be done on Twilio. Not the calling itself, but giving your AI an actual phone number to call people, as well as a phone number to text people, can all be done on Twilio. Dev tools, ngrok, so this is when you're building. How it works is you're building these agents on your computer, but webhooks, like we were speaking about earlier, the notifications that travel along APIs, they need a public server to reach. But because we're building these on our computer isn't public. So ngrok is like a public signpost for the webhooks to point towards our server on our computer. So our agent can receive these webhooks and process them. And CRMs, most of these agents, if you're dealing with companies, are going to want to be integrated into their CRMs. So HubSpot and Salesforce are the biggest ones. There's loads. There's like Zoho, Monday. They're all pretty good. HubSpot is the best at connecting with agents by far. Theirs is just the easiest to use. But CRM, if you ever come across that term, is a customer relationship management tool, and agents are always going to want to be connected to those. If a client of yours doesn't have a CRM, then you can create a custom dashboard for them with Claude Code easily. Right now we're back in Claude Code and we've gone through all the tools that you'll need to build basically 99% of the agents that you want to build starting out. I'm going to show you how I like to make the plan for my projects. So I have a voice to text transcriber on my computer. I custom made it with Claude Code, which is nice because I don't have to pay a subscription. But there's a few out there. One's Whisperflow that I used to use. But if you want to make your own, open a new project in Claude Code and tell it you want to make a voice to text transcriber. You can use DeepGram like we were speaking about earlier for the transcription. Just make an account with them, grab the API key, and then put it into the project. And then I have mine as Control and Windows as the hotkeys. So I just hold those down, speak to it, and it just makes creating a plan so much easier and quicker. And so when you're making a plan for your project, as you can see down here, there's a few different options that you can have. So you want to be in plan mode for the plan, clues in the name. And when it's building, I generally just put it in bypass permissions, because if you don't, you can't take your eye off it because it'll always be asking your permission to do things, which is good if you're doing anything sensitive when it comes to like privacy or security. You want to be monitoring that. But if you're just creating demo agents and you're testing things out and you're creating your first agent, it's a lot more safe than they make it out. But you won't have access to this yet. You have to turn it on if you're brand new to VS Code. So just come down to the left under settings, just type in bypass permissions, and then you just have to tick that box there and then it will be available. But let's start planning this agent. We're going to be creating an AI chatbot on a website for a YouTube video that I'm creating. So it's going to be a demo agent. Fairly simplified. Let's do it for a chiropractor company so it can answer all the questions about chiropractor. So we're going to need to give it some information on that. It can book straight in for an appointment, and we're going to need to create a demo website for this. So just a very simple landing page. Don't overcomplicate it. Just one page, just so we can have a page to have our chatbot on. And it's literally as simple as that to get started with the plan. If the one you're creating is more complex, just speak to it. Just tell it exactly in granular detail, step by step, what you want to have happen, and then read the plan after it's come up with it. See if it's going to build it the way you want it to be built, and then go back and forth with it until it is, and then just start building. And even give details like, I'm not sure how to use this platform, or I don't know what's going on here, or when you're building it, just ask it 1,000,001 questions, and it will just help you through every single little hurdle that you've got. So I'm just going to send that off now as a first message, and then we'll read the plan that it comes up with. So once you've sent off your first message, it'll always come back with a few clarifying questions. So it's just ask for the appointment booking. Should the chatbot actually save bookings to a database, Superbase that we were talking about earlier, or just collect the info and confirm in the chat? I'm going to have it do it on a real database so I can show you how to set that up. Chat UI, should the chatbot appear as a floating widget, bottom right bubble? Yes. That's what I want. Or as a section embed. Yeah, floating widget, that's what we want. What name? Whatever you want. Spinewell Chiropractic. And I'm also going to say, just going to pause that and say, I do want it connected to my calendar as well. So I'm just going to, for the example, going to connect it to my personal Google Calendar. And it's just asked us the tools we're going to give it. So either book directly or check availability and book, which means it's going to check the availability of the calendar before booking. I think this one will just book straight in, which isn't ideal. So we're going to check availability first. And for the purpose of this video, I'm going to go with a service account because that's likely what you would do as a beginner, just going with what it recommended. But OAuth's really easy to set up as well. But for now, let's go with service account. Right, we've got our first draft of the plan. Let's have a look. So yeah, building a demo AI chatbot website for a YouTube video. And this is the sort of granular detail that you can go into when you're building your own agents, either in production or for your business or in a demo environment. You just tell it exactly all of the context that you can think of, because the more context, the better when you're doing with this sort of thing. If you're building it for a business, let it know every single last thing about it. Things like all the different tools used at the minute. You could even upload the company website for it to pull some information from. The more information and the more context, the better when building this sort of thing. Phase 0, prerequisites and setup. So I'll get it to front load all the API keys because that's the most complicated bit, especially if you've never done it before. It's really simple, but that's just the most complicated bit. So we'll get all those out of the way so Claude Code can just build it uninterrupted, and then we can test it at the end without having to stagger the API keys and setting them up only when it needs it. We can set them all up at the start, which just makes it easier for everyone. One thing I've noticed is it's not put at the start of the plan to put the whole plan in the plan.md, and that's a really important thing, is that especially in much bigger plans, you want it to add the plan to the plan.md before anything else. So especially if you've spent a lot of time on the plan, you want this whole thing written in the plan.md before anything else, because sometimes it can skip that if you don't tell it to, because plan.md and progress.md, it's not like an official system that Claude is familiar with. It's my own system that I use to build in Claude Code, so you have to tell it how to use that system. Another thing, all your API keys will go into an environment folder, and you want to keep your environment folder private and your API keys private, so you don't want to be pasting your API keys into the chat when you've got them. You want to put them straight into the environment folder, which I'll show you how to do. And I'll get it to create that environment folder first. So I'll just tell it these couple of things. Before anything in the plan, make sure the first step is to add the entire plan into the plan.md folder. After that, create the environment folder with placeholders so I can paste all the API keys into the placeholders. There we go. First actions, copy this plan into the plan.md folder, initialize the progress.md, which basically just means scaffold it out so it's got all the different phases of the plan in the progress.md, and create the backend folder so we can paste our API keys straight in there. And I've just told it this is a UK-based chiropractic company for this example. Those are small little things that you could miss out, which could cause into issues later on with things like booking into the calendar if it's in the wrong time zone. If you're brand new to this and you've never built with Claude Code or made a plan before, and you don't have much familiarity with AI agents and automations in general, what a really good way to learn whilst you're doing is before you've started building and you've only got a plan, you can just go through each of the phases in the plan and get it to explain to you what's actually happening at each phase. And if there's any tools that you don't recognize or any platforms that you don't recognize or you don't understand what's going on, you can just ask it before you even start building so you get a better understanding of the project. Another thing I like to do is you can copy and paste the entire plan into Claude in a browser and just get it to look at the plan, see if there's any holes in it, see if there's any inconsistencies. It's especially useful when you're pushing things into production because you can get it to stress test the system, see if there's any gaps in terms of privacy or security or error handling, just to get another AI to look over the plan to see if there's any holes, because the one that created it could have created the holes and then not be able to see them itself. But either way, this one looks good, so I'm going to tell it to get on with the plan. And we just press the blue button and switch this to bypass permissions, and we're off. Right, step 0 is complete, and the first thing we have to do is paste our API keys into the backend folder. And where you'll find the environment folder is under backend, and there it is. And so we just need to populate these with our actual keys. And so I'll show you how to do it for these ones. When you're building your agents and automations in the future, you'll be using a load of different platforms, and the best way if you don't know how to grab the API keys is just to ask Claude Code. You can even send it screenshots, copy and paste entire pages, paste them in here, and just get it to walk you through every step. But for these ones, I'll show you how to do these. Starting with Anthropic, go to platform.claude.com. On the left hand side, go to API keys, create a new key, and you'll just need to add about $5 or $6 to your account. So just copy it, paste it over, and make sure there's no spaces before or after it. Next is Supabase. So if you've never used it before, you'll just have to make an account and start a project. Once you're in your project, yours will be empty at the minute, so just press New Project in the top right. Give it a name. I usually just call it the same name as the folder in Claude Code. So for this one, I'm just going to call it CS Chatbot. Give it a password. I usually just let it generate a password. And then select your region. You can be a bit more specific than these. So I'm going to go with London and then create. Once you're in it, your URL will be right there. So just copy that and paste it over into your environment folder. Next is your Supabase key. So come back in here, go over to project settings on the left. Under API keys, come over to the second tab and it's the service role secret that you'll need. So reveal that, copy it, paste it over. Now is Google. Go over to console.cloud.google.com and create a project. I'm just going to use the one I've already got. Type in calendar, press Google Calendar API. You'll have to enable that. Once you've done that, press manage, then go to credentials, and we are using a service account for this one. So create credentials and service account. So just call it whatever you want. I'm just going to call it CS Chatbot, and it will create a service account ID for you. So you can just press generate ID and it'll do that. Copy that email there. We'll need that in a sec, and then create that. Once you've done that, press into it. Under keys, you're going to want to add a key, create new key, and we want JSON. And once you create that, it will just download it straight away. And you can go back in Claude Code and tell it that JSON will be in your downloads. That JSON will be the most recent thing in my downloads, so go have a look and copy it over. There we go, it's copied it over. The final thing we need to do is grab our Google Calendar ID. So go over to Google Calendar, select whichever calendar you want, and go over to settings and sharing. And there's a couple of things you need to do. Under shared with, you need to add people and groups, and then paste that email that we copied before. And then select permission to make changes to events. Once you've done that, just scroll down a little bit, and your calendar ID will be right there. So just copy that, paste that over into your environment folder, and that's it. Once you've pasted that, Control S to save it, then you can exit out of that and let it know. Right, we have updated all of our API keys in the environment folder. Right, it's done with phase 1. It's created the front end and the back end, and it's jumping over to phase 6 now, which is as per the implementation order apparently. So let's let it carry on. Right, so it finished with phase 6, and as you can see down here, the context window is now at 54% used. So whenever this goes over 50%, you're going to want to clear it down. So how we do that is we just tell Claude Code this: update the progress.md with exactly where you're up to so that a new agent will be able to pick up where you left off. So we send that off, and it's updated the progress.md. So we want to clear the chat with /clear. And in the new chat, we just say, get up to speed with the project and carry on with the build. Time to set up our database in Supabase. We just have to copy this SQL into the SQL editor in Supabase. So if it's not giving you this in your chat, just ask it, just give me the SQL in the chat in copy and paste format, and then it'll give you something similar to this. And just copy that in the top right. Go back into your project in Supabase, come over to SQL editor, paste it in there, run it in the bottom right, and you'll get success, no rows returned. And if we come over to the table editor, there it is, the appointments table. All right, everything is complete and it's time to test it. So let's open up the front end. Here it is. Here's our expert chiropractic website. It's got a few prices on there, the times, the opening times, and the contact information. And there's our little chat widget. So let's ask it a question. How much does the initial consultation cost? There we are, £55 and lasts 60 minutes. And it tells you a bit about what will happen during it. And do we want to book it? So yes, let's try book in. So it's let us know about the opening hours and which dates would we want. So let's say next Wednesday and see if it actually knows what I mean by that. All right, yeah, it chose the right date, Wednesday the 19th of March. So let's go Wednesday the 19th of March, 8 a.m. Let's just ask for our name and phone number. Right, let's give my name and a random mobile number. Let's ping that off. All right, it says we're successfully booked in. Let's give us some confirmation details, what to expect, the clinic details. Let's have a look at the calendar. All right, and it's not in the calendar, which is actually a good thing, I think, for this example. So you can see how I would handle this sort of error. So we were looking for it to be booked in right here, Wednesday 8 a.m, but as you can see, nothing there. So let's tell Claude Code what happened. But first, before I do that, let's clear the chat. I just did my first test of the chatbot on the website, and it answered the question correctly. It got the correct price of the appointment and the details associated with it. But when I tried to book in for an appointment, it said I was booked in, but nothing showed up on my calendar. What could be the issue is the model is putting the calendar event in the wrong year, because how these models are trained up, they're trained on data up until a certain date. And then sometimes what can happen is, say that it's trained up to data in 2024, it'll book the date in 2024 instead of this year. There you go. look at the date, it's gone with 2025. There you go. Right, it says it's fixed it. Let's try again. There we go, just done another test. And as we can see, we're all booked in Wednesday. I've just done another test and now it's booked me in for the wrong day. It's booked me in for Thursday instead of Wednesday. There we go, it's given the model the day and date in that format now, so it shouldn't get it wrong. Let's do one more test and make sure it's correct. It's given us the correct day and date in the chat. Let's see if it transfers over to the calendar now. There we go, the appointment is confirmed. And right now it's only asking for our full name and phone number. But you'd want to ask for more than that in production. You would want at least either a mobile or a email. But I'm not going to worry about that for now. The appointment is confirmed. And if we look at the calendar, there we are, Wednesday the 18th at 9 a.m. And that leads me on to what makes production-ready systems. So there are 5 main things you've got to worry about there on screen. So you've got the security and the privacy, which link together. The error handling, because inevitably when you push these into production, something's going to go wrong at some point. So you've got to think about what happens when something goes wrong, whether it's a notification on your phone, whether it triggers another agent that goes in and tries to fix it, or small little things like retrying the API 3 times 60 seconds apart or something like that. And hallucination, so this is a big one even in the website chatbot that we just made there. What happens when a customer asks a question that the AI doesn't know the answer to? You have to give the agent an out in the system prompt. So you need to tell it, if you don't know the answer to a question, say you don't know the answer. Because sometimes if you don't explicitly say you don't know, it'll just hallucinate an answer and give the customer some wrong information, which we can't have. And then the cost, you have to roughly figure out how many users are going to be using it, how many messages is it going to take, how much do the APIs cost for the various tools and platforms you're using. And coming back to security and privacy, so these are the 2 biggest ones in production. So privacy, obviously you want your API keys private. That's probably one of the biggest ones. So when you push these into production, you'll be pushing it into a platform called GitHub, which I'll go into in a second. And you want to make sure your environment folder is private so it doesn't get exposed, because then anyone can steal your API keys and just use up all of your credits and leave you with a massive bill. As well as on privacy, for that website chatbot that we made, people will be giving their own information like their mobile or their email. And you have to make sure your systems are all GDPR compliant so that you're not leaking people's data and you're handling it correctly. And the security pretty much underpins everything else because it's all data and you want your data protected. So this is a rough production deployment pipeline that you could go through when pushing these into production. So what I was doing there was just making that little test agent on my local machine. And if I wanted to push that into production, you use a platform called GitHub, which is an online platform where people can push code to, so that hosting services like AWS or Railway or Vercel can have access to that code and push it onto the web. Railway and Vercel are the 2 main ones for the actual agents and automations themselves. And Vercel is a good one for things like your dashboards and websites and stuff like that. It's good to know what platforms you want to use when pushing into production, but Claude Code will be your best friend on a per project basis, actually helping you do it. Now, what happens with the API keys for your clients? So there's a couple of different ways you can do it depending on how technical the client is. So how it generally works is your keys will be things like the LLMs, and you'll have to bake these into your service fee to make sure you're covering your API costs. So you'll just use your API keys for these. And then the infrastructure, such as the database and Twilio, same thing. You just use your API keys and bake the fees into your service fee. And then for things like the CRM, such as HubSpot or Salesforce, how that works is they connect their accounts and APIs via OAuth. So you won't be expecting, it depends how technical the client is that you've got, because if they're more technical, then they might be happy with setting up their API keys for all these platforms and they want to own everything that way, and so they can track costs internally and they're happy doing that and setting it up. But most of the time that'll be on you. And then for the client's keys, how it works is they sign in via OAuth. So you send them a redirect URL that they paste into their browser, and then it prompts them to sign in with their account, and that just automatically sends us their API keys over. And that works for things like CRMs like HubSpot and Salesforce, as well as email and calendar and other tools like Google and Outlook. And that is everything. Hopefully you now feel more comfortable with Claude Code and building agents and automations with it. If you're a business owner and you were thinking of implementing AI and maybe wanting some help with it, You can always get in contact with me on tom@sentinel.com. I'd be happy to help. Or you can get a free personalized AI integration plan at the first link in the description. It'll go over things like how to set it up, the ROI, the timeline, and stuff like that. But other than that, I really appreciate your time and thanks for watching.